Few people know that in the harsh world of training, when friends started giving up one by one, when his inner voice began to question whether it was all worth it, Jungkook chose silence. He didn't cry in front of others, he held a pen tightly every night. Behind his faint smile during the day, his nights were filled with letters to his mother. Not because he wanted sympathy, but because writing made him feel heard. He never sent those letters. He kept them, one by one, piling up like postponed hopes. While the world saw him as a strong young man, behind that strength was a heart close to breaking. Every letter he wrote was a silent scream. Simple sentences like, "I miss home," or "Today I almost gave up," served as reminders that even the golden Maknae once felt small. Jungkook didn't exaggerate his suffering. Instead, he often wrote lines like, "I have to be strong so mom won't worry." A contradiction between the weight in his chest and the desire to protect those he loved. He didn't want his parents to know that sometimes he cried quietly. And perhaps those letters were his shield, a thin wall that kept him from falling apart. In an old interview, Jungkook once admitted that he felt too young when he had to make big decisions. He didn't know who he was, but he knew what the world expected of him. At this point, those letters became a place where he could speak honestly. When the world told him to shine, the letters recorded how exhausted he was from holding such a blinding light. He was not a robot. He was not a puppet controlled by the industry. He was a boy who wanted to go home but didn't know where home was. And in the silence of those letters, his true voice was the loudest. On every page he wrote, Jungkook tried to store a sliver of hope. He wrote about his dreams, about the day he could buy a house for his parents, about his fear of failing. And even though he never sent them, those letters became reminders that love can exist in the quietest forms. While the world demanded results, these letters reflected the process of a boy becoming a man, the process of wounds turning into strength. And within each stroke of the pen, there were tears that never fell. But over time, those pages were no longer filled with silent cries. They transformed into mirrors of growth. From "I can't do this" to "I'll try again tomorrow." From "I'm afraid to fail" to "I want to make mom proud." The letters became more than an escape. They were stepping stones toward maturity. These moments were never shown to the public, but perhaps this was the most honest part of Jungkook's journey. In a world that worships perfection, he learned to make peace with his imperfections. There were nights when Jungkook stared at the letter for too long, as if hoping the paper could answer his own question. Am I good enough? He never wrote those words explicitly, but every pause, every blank space, felt like a hiding place for his doubts. The letter became a mirror, not to see his face, but to reflect his heart. And even though the world saw a star, on that piece of paper was just a boy who wanted to be understood, without always needing to be perfect. Even after debuting with BTS, he kept those letters. He knew his struggle wasn't over. In fact, a new chapter had begun, and the pressure only grew stronger. Behind the stage, after thousands of cheers, he sometimes returned to those old pages. Not to mourn, but to remember who he was before all the lights came. Those letters were his anchor, keeping his feet on the ground when fame tried to lift him too high. There was one letter that was the hardest to write, not because of what it said, but because of when he wrote it. That night, he almost gave up. He felt like a failure, as a son, as a singer, as a human. But that very night, he wrote the most honest sentence of his life. "I'm tired, but I won't stop." The letter wasn't signed. He simply folded it gently and hid it deep within. Perhaps because he knew it wasn't a letter for his mother, it was a letter for himself. Those letters may have never reached his mother's hands, but they conveyed something deeper. They kept Jungkook whole in moments when he was close to breaking. Every word became a small brick in building his resilience. And when he finally stood on the grand stage, it wasn't just his voice that echoed, but also the echo of all the letters he once wrote in silence. Now, when we see Jungkook smiling on screen, singing with full confidence, few realize that confidence was built from long nights filled with fear. Those letters were never made public. But maybe they are the most important part of the story we never heard. Because behind the strength of an idol lies the tenderness of a boy who simply wanted to make his mother proud. The letter that was never sent, though silent, still speaks. It speaks of dreams, of struggles, of love that doesn't need to be shouted out loud. Jungkook didn't need the world to read those letters. Because just by writing them, he proved one thing, that being strong doesn't mean never being broken, but standing tall even when your heart is in pieces.